How much of what you toss in the kitchen trash after cooking dinner would actually catch more fish than the stuff you paid 15 bucks for at the bait shop? I added it up last year. Over the previous decade, I'd spent north of $2,000 on commercial baits and dough mixes. Just the stuff that goes on the hook. So I ran an experiment. 10 kitchen scraps that normally go in the trash fished head-to-head against their closest commercial equivalent over 3 seasons, kept a notebook, logged every trip, and the results made me angry. Every commercial bait works because of a specific compound, a fatty acid, an amino acid chain, something the fish's sensory system is wired to detect. Those same compounds exist in food you throw away every week. The molecule is the molecule. You've been paying for the label. Stick around for the last one on this list, Overripe strawberries. They outfished commercial carp bait 3 weekends straight on a lake I won't name because the regulars would never let me hear the end of it. Shrimp shells and tails, the parts you peel off and throw in the garbage without thinking. Every time you make shrimp tacos or a shrimp boil, you're throwing away what might be the most versatile free bait in your kitchen. The shells are made of chitin, which is the same compound that forms the exoskeletons of crawfish, mayflies, and most of the aquatic insects fish eat every day. When chitin breaks down in water, it releases a cocktail of amino acids that bass, catfish, and panfish are hardwired to follow. The smell isn't subtle. Drop a handful of crushed shrimp shells in a bucket of lake water, and within an hour you can see minnows crowding the bucket. That's the amino acid plume doing its job. The prep takes about a minute. You can thread whole tail sections onto a circle hook. That's the hook with the curved point that sets itself, and fish them on the bottom. Or you can crush the shells into a rough paste with a fork and pack them around a treble hook wrapped in cheesecloth, about a square the size of a matchbook. The paste method disperses scent faster because it exposes more surface area to the water. I tested both on the Coosa River in Alabama over 6 trips last spring. The paste outperformed whole tails by about a third in total strikes, and both outperformed the commercial shrimp-scented dip bait I'd been buying for years. The commercial version uses shrimp extract, which is the same amino acid profile in concentrated form. You're just getting it straight from the source instead of from a jar with a base on the label. You've probably peeled shrimp 1,000 times and never once looked at that pile of shells and thought, that's fish bait. But it is. And it's been going in your trash can for years. The one condition where shells fail is heat. If you're fishing in water above 85 degrees and the shells have been sitting in the sun for an hour, they go rancid fast and the scent shifts from food to warning in the water. Keep them in a sealed bag on ice. Not optional. Once you've got shrimp scent in the water, the next move is to spread it wider. That's where canned tuna juice comes in. Not the tuna itself. The liquid you pour down the drain when you crack open the can. It's concentrated fish oil and dissolved amino acids in a form that disperses the second it touches water. Soak a soft plastic bait in tuna juice for 30 minutes before a trip, and you've turned a $3 artificial into a scented bait that rivals anything with a pro angler's face on the package. I keep a mason jar of it in my fridge. My wife hates it, but it works. A single can of chunk light tuna produces enough juice to soak a dozen baits, and the shelf life in the fridge is about 2 weeks before it goes bad. On Lake Lanier in Georgia, I ran this against an unscented zoom worm and the same worm soaked in tuna juice. Same rod, same retrieve, alternating casts. The soaked version drew 19 strikes over 4 hours. The plain version got 8, 19 to 8. And the tuna juice cost me nothing because I was already making sandwiches. Chicken skin barely needs an explanation. You trim it off a thigh or a breast, cut it into strips about the size of a credit card, and thread it on a 3/0 circle hook. It's tough enough to hold in current, it won't fly off on the cast, and the rendered fat leaches slowly into the water, putting out a scent trail that channel catfish follow like a highway. On a warm evening when the water is in the mid-70s and the cats are actively feeding, a strip of chicken skin on the bottom will produce bites within minutes. I'm lukewarm on this one compared to the others because it's a single species play. If you're targeting channel cats on the bottom, it works. If you're after anything else, skip it and use one of the others. The cheap factor is real though. You get enough skin from one package of chicken thighs to fish an entire weekend for free. And if you're grilling those thighs for dinner on Friday night, you've got Saturday morning's bait handled before you even finish eating. Where chicken skin works in warm, slow water, the next one shines in cooler conditions where you need something that holds together and lasts. Parmesan cheese rinds. That hard nub at the end of a wedge of Parmesan, the part you can't grate anymore and usually toss. It's dense. It holds on a hook better than almost any commercial dough bait I've ever used. And it leaches oils and fatty acids slowly over an hour or more, which means it's putting scent into the water long after a commercial bait would have dissolved and fallen off. You can cube it into pieces about the size of a poker chip and thread it onto a treble hook. Carp, catfish, and stocked trout all take it. European carp anglers have used cheese-based baits for decades, and tournament guys in the UK consider it a standard approach. The Parmesan rind just happens to be the hardest, longest-lasting version you can get without buying specialty tackle shop dough. I tested it at Watauga Lake in Tennessee against a name-brand trout dough in stocked rainbow water. The Parmesan rind lasted about 3 times longer per cast, which meant more time fishing and less time rebaiting. Over a 4-hour session, that adds up to maybe 40 extra minutes of line in the water. The catch rate was close to even, maybe a slight edge to the commercial stuff in cold water below 50 degrees. But when you factor in that one costs $0 and the other costs $8, the math isn't close. A guy at Lake Texoma runs Parmesan rinds for channel cats all summer and says he hasn't bought dip bait in 3 years. Watermelon rind is old-school southern catfishing, and most people outside of the Gulf states have never heard of it. I hadn't until a guy in his 70s showed me on the bank of the Flint River in Georgia about 8 years ago. You cut the white and green part of the rind, the part nobody eats, into cubes roughly the size of a pair of dice and thread them on a circle hook. The sugars in the rind break down in water and put out a faint, sweet trail that catfish follow, especially in slow current where the scent has time to spread. It won't outperform a fresh chicken liver or a live worm in a head-to-head test, I'll be honest about that. But the advantage is durability. A watermelon rind cube stays on a hook in current that would rip a chicken liver off in seconds. You can fish it for 45 minutes without rebaiting, which over a full session adds up to a lot more time with your line in the water. And it's free. You're already eating the watermelon, might as well fish the leftovers. Old guys on the St. Johns River in Florida have fished this since the 1950s. And some of them still swear it catches bigger catfish than cut bait does. I'm not sure I'd go that far, but it works. It costs nothing. And during July and August, when watermelons are $3 a piece, you could fish the rind from a single melon for a month of weekend trips. This next one sounds wrong, and I thought it was wrong for 2 years before I actually tested it. Used coffee grounds. Not as a bait by themselves, they'd fall apart in water. As an additive, you mix about 2 tablespoons of used grounds into any flour-based dough bait and it does 2 things. First, it darkens the color, which gives you better contrast in stained or muddy water where fish hunt by shadow and silhouette. A pale dough ball in murky water is almost invisible. A dark one stands out like a rock on a sandbar. Second, and this is the part that surprised me, the coffee neutralizes human scent on the bait better than most commercial scent masking sprays. Your hands leave traces of oils and compounds on everything you touch, and fish detect those traces and pull away. Coffee grounds absorb and overwrite those traces. The fish don't taste the bitterness the way you would because their chemoreceptor systems aren't built for it. They just detect the absence of the thing that was warning them off, which is you. I add grounds to every dough bait I make now. It's become as automatic as wetting my line before tying a knot. Any brew works. The cheap stuff from the drip machine is fine. You don't need to grind fresh beans for a catfish. If you're getting something out of this, subscribe. We do one of these every week. I'll probably get some pushback on this next one. Beef fat trimmings. You know those white strips you cut off a steak or a roast before you cook it? Most people throw them straight in the trash or give them to the dog. But that fat, when threaded onto a circle hook or wrapped in cheesecloth, puts out a lipid trail in water that is chemically similar to what commercial stink baits use as their base. The main difference is the delivery system. Commercial stink baits add thickeners and preservatives so the product holds together on a shelf for months. Your beef fat does the same job for about 6 hours before it breaks down too much to stay on a hook, which is more than enough for a morning session. And unlike commercial dip bait, it doesn't smell like something died in your truck on the way home. I tested it on the Potomac River against a commercial catfish dip bait that costs $11 for a small jar. Over 3 trips, the beef fat produced 14 catfish. The commercial dip got 11. Same spots, same rigs, alternating every hour. The fat also picked up 3 carp that hit it on the bottom, which was a bonus I didn't expect. The biggest catfish of those 3 trips, a 7-pounder, came on the beef fat at about 9 in the morning when the sun was just starting to warm the shallows. Now, some guys will say beef fat isn't a natural food source for freshwater fish, and they'd be right. But neither is the combination of aged cheese and chicken blood that goes into most commercial stink baits. The fish don't care about the source. They care about the lipid signature, and beef fat delivers it. The limitation is temperature. Below about 55 degrees, the fat solidifies and stops dispersing. Above 55, it's excellent. Save your trimmings in a Ziploc bag in the freezer and you'll have free bait stacked up by the time spring hits. I've got 3 bags in my freezer right now from the last month of dinners. My wife thinks I've lost my mind. She might be right, but the freezer bait keeps producing. Egg yolks are a binding agent first and a bait second, but that combination makes them more useful than most people realize. You take leftover yolks, the ones from recipes that only use whites, mix them with plain flour until you get a stiff dough, and roll it into balls. About the size of a golf ball for carp. About the width of a dime for panfish. The protein in the yolk leaches amino acids as the dough slowly dissolves, and the bright yellow color gives you a visual advantage in stained water where panfish and trout hunt partly by sight. The dough also firms up slightly after 10 minutes underwater, which means it holds on a hook better than most commercial alternatives that start dissolving the second they get wet. On Kentucky Lake last October, I fished egg yolk dough against plain flour dough with no additive. Same hook, same rig. The egg dough pulled 13 bluegill and 2 crappie over a full afternoon. The plain dough got 5 bluegill and nothing else. The yolk was doing something the flour alone wasn't, and my best guess is the combination of amino acid output and color contrast made the difference. 1 batch of dough, 4 yolks, and a cup of flour fits in a sandwich bag and keeps in the fridge for about a week. You can make it on a Tuesday night and have it ready when you decide to fish on Saturday. Potato peels. Parboil them for about 5 minutes so they firm up, cut them into strips, and thread them on a small hook. Carp eat them without hesitation because starch fragments and root pieces wash into waterways naturally from eroding banks and agricultural runoff, so the peels don't trigger any suspicion. The potato is already part of the underwater food chain in most farm country lakes and rivers. You're just delivering it on a hook instead of letting the rain do it. This isn't going to win any head-to-head tests against corn or boilies for carp. I'll be straight about that. But it costs nothing. It stays on a hook and it catches fish. I've used potato peels on slow afternoons when I ran out of everything else and still put carp on the bank. I had a day last fall where potato peel was the only thing working because the carp in that pond had been pressured so hard on corn they'd stopped eating it entirely. Sometimes the best bait is the one that's sitting on your counter when you decide to go fishing in 20 minutes and don't feel like stopping at the store on the way. I saved this for last because it's the one that broke something in my brain about how I think about bait. Overripe strawberries. The mushy ones sitting at the bottom of the container that you're about to throw away. Cut them in half, thread them on a hair rig, which is a setup where the bait hangs just below the hook on a short piece of line, and fish them on the bottom for carp. When strawberries go soft, the sugars inside start fermenting. That fermentation produces small amounts of ethanol and a mix of organic compounds that dissolve rapidly in water. Carp detect those compounds at extremely low concentrations through chemoreceptors tuned for exactly this kind of signal: decaying plant matter releasing sugar byproducts. In nature, that means fallen fruit along a riverbank or rotting vegetation in the shallows. Your overripe strawberry mimics that signal almost perfectly. I don't fully understand every piece of the science, but the field results are hard to argue with. 3 weekends on a lake in central Texas. Same spots I'd been fishing with commercial boilies for 2 years. The strawberries outproduced the boilies on all 3 trips. First weekend, 7 carp on strawberries versus 3 on the commercial bait. Second weekend, 5-2. Third weekend, 9-4, and the biggest fish of the season, a 22-pounder that took a strawberry half that had been sitting in the sun long enough to go properly mushy. The mushier, the better. That's when the fermentation compounds are strongest. A firm strawberry doesn't work nearly as well. You want the ones that are a day past the point where you'd eat them. A package of strawberries costs about $4. By the time you sort out the overripe ones, you've got bait for 2 or 3 trips. A tub of quality carp boilies costs $15 and lasts about the same number of sessions. Over a season, that's $100 in boilies replaced by fruit you were going to throw out anyway. One of the regulars at the lake noticed. He asked what I was using. When I showed him the strawberries, he laughed for about 30 seconds straight. Then he watched me land 2 carp in the next hour, and he stopped laughing. He brought his own container the following Saturday. He hasn't bought boilies since. 10 scraps. All free. All headed for your trash can tonight. The tackle industry spent decades convincing you that the stuff on their shelves is something special. It isn't. It's chemistry in a jar with a logo on it. The same chemistry is sitting on your kitchen counter right now, and the fish can't read labels. Next time you're peeling shrimp or trimming a steak or cleaning out the back of the fridge, take a look at what's in your hand before it hits the garbage. Bag it. Ice it. Bring it to the water on Saturday morning. Let the guys with the $200 tackle bags wonder why your cooler is heavier than theirs at the end of the day.